And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, we'll start this segment off with some flying weather for Thursday morning. A lot of IFR here over the eastern Bering Sea into the southwest coastal areas, and then north through the Bering Strait and covering much of the southeastern Chukchi Sea and the northwest coast up to about Point Ley. And then some IFR here, looks like roughly the Kobuk Valley to the Brooks Range, at least the southern slopes there. More IFR here along and south and east of the Alaska Range, and another zone there along the North Gulf Coast to about Yakutat. For the afternoon, still some areas of IFR across the northern interior here, mostly south of the Brooks Range, and then still IFR along and south of the Alaska Range, down over the southern Copper River Basin into the North Gulf Coast. And a couple of zones of IFR out here over the eastern Bering Sea. This one pushing a fair ways in over the Yukon Delta and King Salmon area east of Dillingham, VFR, Alaska Peninsula, possibly the eastern Aleutians look to be VFR for Thursday afternoon. And for the morning hours on Friday, IFR here along the Brooks Range down into the northern Koyukuk Valley, VFR in the interior here all the way down now into Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, even into Kodiak, with IFR extending northeastward there from the Gulf into Yakutat, marginal VFR for the southeast coast, and not too bad out here over the central Aleutians and Bering Sea area with some pretty widespread VFR in the forecast. And then for the afternoon, big area of IFR here pushes eastward all the way to Adak by the afternoon hours. And another zone here along the north side of the Alaska Peninsula area, staying mostly off the coast though elsewhere. And a zone of marginal VFR over the western part of the state extending eastward here across the Brooks Range and the North Slope with some IFR for the western North Slope and possibly around Selawik there. Otherwise, marginal VFR and IFR here for the southeast coast, and that reaches into the eastern Copper River Basin as well as the eastern Alaska Range. Passes for tomorrow on the Brooks Range, we're looking at slowly diminishing conditions for both Anatuvik and Adigan, becoming marginal VFR into the afternoon hours. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR. Pretty good chance IFR for rainy and windy as well. And Isabel looks rather IFR for the day on Thursday. And Mentasta, marginal VFR. Tanita, IFR. Portage, IFR, especially on the eastern entrance. And for Chilkoot and White, call it marginal at this point in time. And the freezing levels here, some warm air, a little bit of warm air aloft, reaching all the way up to the Arctic coast up there, about 2,000 feet. Otherwise, 2,000 feet here down along the south coast of the Panhandle, with the surface just inland tomorrow morning, cutting out across, north of Bristol Bay, and then extending down toward Adak and Atka. Icing, best chance of some significant icing will be here along the North Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle. Otherwise, areas of possible icing, light to very isolated moderate, to exist here in the big shaded area from the northwest coast, across the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, Pribilofs, and a couple of zones of possible significant icing there for the central and eastern Aleutians, western Alaska Peninsula. And the jet stream showing a broad area low pressure here over the eastern Bering Sea down to the Alaska Peninsula. Westerly winds up to 120 knots, making landfall between Port Alexander and Sitka. Otherwise, the stronger jet core here still south of the Aleutian chain. And for 9,000 feet, low pressure here along the southwest coast. Southwest winds 45 knots to the east of that center. North winds 40 knots just back to the west, but even stronger 45 to 50 knot winds here coming down out of the central Bering Sea into the central Aleutian areas. East-southeast 40 knots along the eastern Arctic coast, and southwest winds anywhere from 40 to 50 knots blowing across the Panhandle. 3,000 feet, 70 knot winds mostly off the eastern Arctic coast up there. Northerlies to northeasterlies 60 knots, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and turning north at about 40 to 45 knots there through the Bering Sea to the Aleutians, and then southwest 40 knots along the north coast of Bristol Bay. And for turbulence, stronger winds up through this area. Look for considerable moderate turbulence there for Point Hope, Cape Lisburne area through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island, as well as areas from about Nikolsky westward to Adak.